Hi, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in, as always. I hope you're having a good day or night whenever you happen to be listening to this. It was just Labor Day when I recorded this. This is a few weeks from now. I had a pretty good Labor Day weekend, and one thing I did this weekend was I went to my fiance's boss's wedding. So I want to say congratulations to Stuart and Machida. So thank you very much for the invite. I've been going to a lot of weddings this summer, man. I think it's just part of the times of where I'm at in my age range, but it's been pretty nice. And then also being engaged as well has been pretty lovely as well. And going through that process, I empathize a lot with all of the. I've been appreciating everything that's been featured at the weddings I've been to, because I know I'm aware of the work that's going into it. On the show today, a guy I haven't seen in a number of years, comedian Troy Allen is my guest on the show today. He's on his way over now. Troy has known me for a while, and he's seen me through my various phases of writing lots of sad jokes, and doing and also being a doorman at the Laughing Devil. He's seen me through various incarnations of my mental health, and that's something I want to talk to him today about, because he just came back from doing his one-man show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and I definitely want to talk to him about his experiences with that, and then we're gonna see where this conversation goes. I love these kinds of chats with other comedians, and I'm not sure what your profession is or what you're interested in, dear listener, but when you get to sit down and chat with someone who's really into a thing that you're into and knows a lot about it, there's that sort of there's that kind of like mutual understanding and sort of like ease that you can converse about it with. I would imagine, and I don't want to compare it to military service, although I'm sure it is, because I feel like the comedian's job and being in the military is very, it's not an equal comparison, even though lots of comedians refer to non-comics as civilians. But I will say like if you were a dentist and you sat down and you could chat with another dentist about all the great things and then all the annoying things about being a dentist. That's what I like about being able to talk to other comedians on this show, and I appreciate that you guys are here listening. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and also this is just a nice. These chats I do, they're a nice tap out from just my life, just from the nonstop grind of living and existing in 2019 nowadays, and I'm glad that you're here with me for that. So thank you guys very much for listening to this. If you enjoy this episode and you feel like you have a friend who might as well, please feel free to send them a link. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can add us to your favorite playlists on Stitcher. That helps other people find it on Stitcher. And if you can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that helps other people on that platform find it. And you guys are my best advocates, and I appreciate that you're here listening. And also, you can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and I'll tell you about some other stuff I'm doing at the end of the show here. Thank you guys for being here, and let's go to my chat with comedian Troy Allen. Exactly.
In a mic.
Yeah, 100%. And you have heard my comedy. I feel like you and this is what I was thinking about when you were on your way over here. I feel like I can pinpoint key moments in my life in New York City and as a comedian, and you've been there. Like I remember when I was like really sad and I was writing lots of sad jokes, and you're like, "Oh, Will's sad again." And then, it's good. It'll be funny once there's distance from it. I think that was during the Laughing Devil days.
Was it? Yeah, I think that's probably true for any joke. I mean, it's really hard to make something funny right in the fire. You're not cracking jokes while you're trying to put the fire out.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
cracking them after.
Yeah, and
Maybe.
anytime you're actively trying to crack the jokes in the fire, it's just everyone else feels the fire. It's like, oh, you're burning, dude. You are actively on fire.
Maybe some water first, and then write the jokes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I found now that because I'm working on, and I want to talk to you about this as well, because I'm focusing on my one person storytelling show, and it's got lots of like funny and then also personal stuff as well. And then you just did your show at Edinburgh.
Yeah. Are you recording?
I started. That's how.
I didn't see that.
Oh yeah, that's how I start.
All right, so we're in. We're here.
Yeah, we're in it. It's
Hi,
happening. So I'm working on like my solo storytelling show, and then also being able to make the jokes about the super painful stuff. And then the other thing I'm coming to is trying to have like a healthy perspective on events like that, where I'm not just like this person sucks for this reason and they will always suck, they will never not suck. That is their identity now. Finding nuance, which is not hip in comedy right now.
No, but I think
nuance.
It's where a lot of the gold lies.
Yeah.
It's easy to take whomever did whatever to you, define them by that action, thereby dehumanizing them.
Yeah.
And then dismissing them. It's very easy to do that. It's convenient. It might even be psychologically beneficial for a time.
Yeah.
But to come back to it and then work with their humanity in the material and the jokes you're trying to write about it, I think the richer stuff is there.
I think so.
Because you can dismiss anyone. If you want to jump right into it, my dad's a pedophile. Easy. You can just say, that guy's a fucking monster. That's all he is. That's all he's ever been. That's all he's ever done. I don't need to know anymore. And for the average person, totally agree with that. Why would you need a relationship with my dad unless you were a researcher or something like that?
Yeah, of course. But is it because he's your dad? You also have to wrestle with. You've got to think of him as a person. You're thinking of him as a person.
Well,
also.
I knew him first as a person, and I kind of touch on this in the show because I do a story about he's got Parkinson's now, and I tell a story about how we were traveling with his Parkinson's, and the first introduction you get to him, you're feeling bad for the guy. You're like, oh,
right.
And then you feel you're like, oh, his son took him on vacation. Isn't this nice? And then I'm like, well, here's the other side here's the other P in his life. And I followed up with a short discussion, like, people will ask me, and I've had the question, hey, how the hell do you go on vacation with this guy? How the hell do you do that? And I don't have a real good answer. I don't have it in the show. I don't have it right now, except in the show I say, before I knew what he was, I knew him as my dad. And he was the image of man that I was like, okay, this is what it means to be a man, and all of he's got a lot of big fish sort of stories. You ever see that movie?
Yeah.
And I don't know where truth and fiction separate. As I get older, I can kind of like, all right, that was probably bullshit. But up until I don't know when I was old enough to figure it out, but I was like, oh, he was a Civil War general. And that's just a poor grasp on history. That's all that was. I thought he was a millionaire. I thought he was a general in the military. He was he was a non-commissioned officer. He was as far from general as you could be.
Right.
But I had all these things about him in my head, and he taught me all the things I knew to be a man: how to shoot a gun, how to drive a car in bad weather. And I talk about this quite a bit. So before he was that thing, he was all of those other things to me. He was this integral part of my upbringing, for good or for bad. I mean, because there's a lot of bad in that, but
of course, yeah.
But there's the human in him, and I've seen human moments out of him that defy the predisposition you'd have towards him for what he is in terms of his his biology or his neurology, however you want to think about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that's got to be probably more so than that's probably more to grapple with than most people have to when it comes to their parents, I imagine. So,
I don't know. It's relative. I look around and I see some people with some pretty heart-wrenching stories, and I think, well, okay, maybe I've got some reprieve in my own situation. Maybe there's a tiny bit of reprieve here, and I can be grateful that that's not part of my life. But
sure,
that gets into this kind of relativist thing. It's like, what's worse? I don't know. Well, I can tell you that if your parents were just divorced and it was amicable, I'm not gonna have a lot for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it because it hurts and there's struggle with it, but it's going to be hard for me to
just really, I know exactly what you mean.
To listen to that and accept it. I don't know. I guess it's just kind of a judgy thing. When you got this, you're like, yeah, this is pretty bad, and I hear you, but in relative terms, it's not that bad. But it's not relative to them. It's absolute for them. It's always absolute for the individual. It's relative to everyone else, I guess, if that makes any sense. Because your suffering is yours, and it's yours to define, and it's as bad as you say it is. And then mine is mine, and it's as bad as I say it is. Mm-hmm. Who's to say which is worse?
Yeah. And it's because it's all up to the person going through the thing. Yeah. I do relate to that now though, and I try very hard not to like get into what's the phrase I'm thinking of is like, I guess, like, you know, the Pain Olympics, like qualitative is like, you know, mine's worse. No, this is worse and this is worse. I try not to get into that. But it is very hard. I find it seems like it should be so easy to just have a baseline empathy for most people. And I think most people do, but then there are certain things where it's like, I'm sure that is really bad. There are so much worse. You're going to be okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the most ridiculous example would be like the Sweet 16 dumbass show that was on for a while with these kids.
Oh yeah,
you know, you're watching them, and they get a and there's a story recently. Some kid pushed a Beamer into the fucking ocean because he wanted a different car for his birthday or something like that. Mm-hmm. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and say that anything that's happened to anybody else is worse than the problem that he's got right now. Yeah, and shut up with your whiny ass problems. There is a point where I'm like, just shut up and. You're a whiny bitch. That's all you are right now, and there's a lot worse that could happen. But this is how good your life is that this is the worst thing that's happened to you. Exactly. So I can be like a little, maybe I guess tragedy elitist in that way. It's like, yeah, okay, but did this happen? You know,
of course,
you're not allowed in my club.
Yeah, I really wish, like, you know how there was, you know that show Scared Straight.
I've never seen the show, but I participated in the program as a teenager.
So. In what way? Like
Scared Straight, I was a kid in the program.
Oh, so you got scared. You weren't doing the scare.
Well, they didn't do a lot of scaring for me. I was in with a group of pretty rough kids that were probably career criminals, and I was just a kid who'd been arrested a few times acting out against his parents and eventually cleaned it up. But, you know, I could have been – I don't think I could have been some of those kids. They were
Okay, so Scared Straight program – but for whiny bitches like the Super 16 people, it's like, oh, I got the wrong car. And then as soon as they say it, someone just sneaks up behind them, puts a burlap bag over their head, throws them in a van, and then they just drive for like 4 hours, and then they just get yelled at in the woods. Then the bag goes back over the head. They get driven back, thrown in front of their house, and then they go and they hopefully live a better life.
I have to do something. I've often thought of a show called Manhattan Rumspringa. Where you take these native New Yorker kids that have never lived anywhere but here and drop them off in middle America. It's like, all right, now survive, Mr. Sophisticated knows about the world. I can't. I don't know how to cook, drive, or do laundry. Yeah, you're right. In this part of the world, you're a special needs person. It doesn't make you strong, sophisticated. It makes you incapable. Just drop them off and be like, all right, you've never been out of Manhattan. Get out. Go leave. You can't come back for 5 years. You can come back if you want to, but you have to leave the city. They're like in West Wing, Josh's character describes people from Connecticut as like swallows to Capistrano. And that's the way I think of like native New Yorkers. They just can't venture too far away from here because it's so enabling. Yeah. And they become used to one thing. But yeah, that's not sophistication. If you can't survive outside of here, you're not sophisticated. You're very limited in your scope and your ability to explore the world. Right. Yeah, so I'll trash them on it. I think it'd be fun to just take hardcore. Yeah. Have never been out above 14th Street kind of New Yorker and be like, all right, here's Lima, Ohio. Yeah. And you have a job.
And you have to drive to that job.
Yes,
you don't have a license? Then you're awesome. Walking.
And you're 35. Oh, that's impressive. You're very sophisticated. Do you know how to cook? Mm-mm. Well, all right. Yeah. So how do you do laundry? No, people just don't come pick it up. That's not how it works here in Lima.
That has been my experience. My fiance is born and raised in Brooklyn. So moving to Queens was like a big deal.
She thought she had to get a passport.
My whole thing was like, no, any of the 5 boroughs is better than what's out there. Because the first time she came to visit me, and I'm from like the boonies. I'm from the boonies in Maryland. I'm from Southern Maryland. I am from a suburb, a wealthy suburb of DC, but it is very remote.
Well, I used to live in Alexandria. We're in Maryland.
I grew up in St. Leonard, Maryland, and Lusby, so that's Calvert County. That's about an hour south of DC.
Okay.
So about like 50 minutes south on Route 2 and 4 from Alexandria.
South from Alexandria?
Yeah.
In Maryland?
Yeah. Well, south of DC. I can't remember exactly on the map where Alexandria is, but
well, Alexandria is on the if you're on the Beltway, it's at the very bottom button on the Beltway, basically.
Okay.
So Maryland's north. I thought
some of it is, but some of it is.
Okay,
I'm from the southern part.
You ever heard of Chincoteague?
Yeah.
And Assateague? That's where like Maryland, that's where you drive through Maryland, north into Maryland, and go south on that peninsula. Mm-hmm. And if you drive far enough, it's Virginia again.
Yeah. Okay.
I used to go on vacation in that place.
Assateague's where the ponies are.
Yeah, Assateague's where that little ponies run wild.
So I'm from the other side of the Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
That's
sense.
where I'm from.
Yep.
And you grew up in Alexandria?
No, I grew up in Fountain, Colorado.
That's right,
Yeah.
Colorado. Now, my understanding of Colorado is Denver, Boulder. That's where all the hippies hang out.
Yeah.
Where is Fountain hit? Colorado?
Fountain is about an hour and 20 minutes south of Denver.
Okay.
It's a suburb basically of Colorado Springs. It's a bedroom community really just to Fort Carson.
Gotcha.
Which is an Army base.
Oh, okay. So basically like a place to just go home, go to sleep.
Yeah, there's not a lot going on down there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's middle-sized town America anywhere.
Yep.
Little to the conservative side. Definitely on the boring side. Very certainly mostly military. There's NORAD, Peterson Air Force Base, the Air Force Academy, and Fort Carson. They're all right there. So there's a lot of military. Mm-hmm. That's basically what the town is.
Right. And so your dad was in the military.
Yeah, he was in the Army for 30 years.
He was in the Army for 30 years. And so are you living on a base when you're growing up?
No, we didn't live on bases. Not when we did live. Did we live on base in Alaska? Fort Pine Street. No, we lived off base in Alaska too. I've never, as far as I know in my life, I've never lived in a military base.
No.
We've lived close.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Alabama. Because we were in Alabama for 6 months when I was really young. He was doing some training, and then we moved to Alaska. But most of it's just been housing outside of the, pretty close to the base.
Okay. Yeah. So when you were so Alabama early on briefly, and then Alaska. But are your like formative memories in Alaska, or are they in Colorado?
They're all in Colorado. I've got some memories of Alaska. I was 5 years old, 5 to 8 years old, and so there are memories there, very clear memories, and then some things that are just lost in history.
Gotcha. And what did your mom do?
She was a stay-at-home mom.
Stay-at-home mom.
And when she had jobs, it was usually as a seamstress until my parents got divorced. She was doing alterations, things like seamstress. What is it, 1840? She was doing alterations and stuff like that, part-time work. And that freed her up to do, start the Little League that I played Little League in. She was on the original board of directors for that. She's like, I got nothing to do. Let's start a baseball league. Which still exists to this day, Fountain Valley Little League, and do other things, take care of the house and the kid, sort of.
Gotcha. And did your parents get divorced because your dad is a pedophile, or did that happen before that?
That was the core reason, but it was long after that had all been done in the family that my mom actually divorced him, because I'm the youngest by 9 years. I've got 3 older sisters.
3 older sisters.
Yeah,
okay.
And we were in Alaska. All this went down, which is really kind of that's a tidy way to wrap it all up. And
yeah, of course.
Get into
I don't need
all this went down, and then
I don't need the messy details. My imagination's bad enough.
We don't want them. And then my mom found out, and she partly stayed with him, and this is a little bit of the messy detail. She went to the military in 1975 and said, hey, my husband's doing this to my daughters. And they said, well, yeah, you can report it, but what are you going to do to support the kids? Right. What about your husband's career? there's the right focus. Let's
Yeah.
worry about that.
Yeah, it's fucked up. Fucked up response.
Pretty fucked up response, but exactly what you'd expect in 1975 America.
Yes.
There wasn't Oprah yet. We didn't have talk shows where you could air this out. We didn't have a voice. So she stayed with them because it's a good point, really, to be quite fair.
Mm-hmm.
She had jobs at a fabric store. How's she going to support 3 daughters? Well, the military. She probably would have gotten a divorce settlement, but whatever.
Yeah.
So she stayed with them. I tried to make it work until I got out of high school, and that finally fell apart the summer of 1986.
Gotcha.
Yeah, when I was 16, right before my junior year of high school.
Okay, yeah. so our parents got divorced kind of when we were around the same age.
Yeah, it's a fun time for a divorce.
Yeah. Me at least, and I think my parents' situation was definitely very different. But I was old enough to kind of I was old enough to understand. Oh yeah, that's probably a good decision you're making.
You were like, yeah, I listened to you guys fight. I think this is a good call right here.
Yeah, he's pissing me off too.
So it was all on your dad, do you think?
Yeah, mostly. The stuff that I learned later is that it maybe wasn't. It was my dad that did the shit that instigated it, but that doesn't happen out of nowhere. But it's maybe like a 95-5 split.
Yeah, it's tough to look back on these things and judge them. I mean, it's easy because I have a lot of information about my family history, but the more the older I get, and the more I watch people's lives unfold, and the things they did when they were younger, how they were behaving, the more just like there's light on it. You're like, I have more understanding of this now.
Oh yeah,
I have a greater appreciation for the person, or maybe just a tiny shred of compassion where there wasn't before.
Yeah.
A friend of mine died in February. Like our first of the core group of our friends in high school died of a massive heart attack at 49 years old. And I hated his mom, hated her. Because at precisely the point when I needed my friends the most, she made it not okay for them to hang out with me in high school. And it was devastating. And I carried this hate with me for so long. Yeah. And then after Mike died, I had a phone call with a friend of ours, and she was telling me about how severely his mom was abused by his dad, and nobody knew in the neighborhood. That was information that had been covered up since 1978 up until now. I had no idea. And it made me reevaluate, not entirely because she was still pretty cold to me, doing it best for her kids. I can't blame her for that, but where was the compassion for this kid who just got bowled over?
Of course.
And I carried all this, so then I learned that, and I was like, shit. Of course she was a bitch.
Yeah.
She was getting her ass beat at home, and nobody knew. And Mike carried that with him. I was blown away that my friend carried that with him. I talked openly about my parents' divorce with him, and that never came out.
Right.
And I was just so baffled just kind of dumbfounded when I heard it. I was like, you carried that with you, and you knew you had a place you could go with it.
Uh-huh.
How much shame is around it when you've got a friend you could talk to who's somebody's, in a similar boat.
Right.
And he kept that wrapped. And it's still something I think about right now. Cause, when I process his death, and we weren't close after school. It'd been years since I talked to him, but it's like, whoa. And then that information comes out, and you're like, oh, okay, so I see this person in a slightly different light now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for the death of your friend. That's that's never easy, but just kind of having to. Now that, because now that information as well, so it changes the narrative.
Yeah, and it reminds me that I should also, you never really know what someone's going through. Mm-hmm. You never know what's in their life, what's in their head, and I try to keep that in mind sometimes. It's a struggle, especially when, emotions get involved, or it's just straight being an asshole.
Of course.
Try to put that in context, but
yeah,
it helps. I mean, anytime you can, I guess, acknowledge the humanity in someone who isn't behaving very much like a human.
Sure.
I think you get a little closer to being you improve yourself, and you get a little closer to some wisdom in the world.
I think so.
I hope.
I think so. Absolutely. And that's valuable for navigating life. Certainly.
I hope.
It's it takes a it's a lot of, I don't want to use the cliche. It takes a big person. It takes like a big man or a big person to be able to do that, but it does.
It takes just a little bit of a deep breath
Mm-hmm.
and an acknowledgement of a truth that you're trying to deny, I think.
Yeah.
Because, we're not going to get into the politics, but it's easy to completely dehumanize the piece of shit we call a president.
Right.
And I just did it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy for me because I hate everything about him, but
Yeah.
he still is a human, and even I can't accept anything about him, his presidency, the people who still support him. I just cannot look at them with any objectivity,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's necessary to do that right now. What's on the line is greater than their individual humanity.
Yeah.
But
We're in the fire.
Yeah, I had a really profound point I was going to make. Dang it! But now I lost it. Maybe it'll come back.
Yeah, it's very easy to dehumanize him because of what he's doing, and the people who voted for him, certainly, and this is something I do also because a lot of my I think especially in the circles I run in, there are a lot of people that would make the very easy thought to say, if you voted for him, you are an abject racist, that you always have been and you always will be, and I'm done with you.
I'm guilty of that, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think there's a lot of people that say it, but I've also watched enough to know that there's a very fascinating Showtime documentary that they did when they followed the New York Times covering the first year of his presidency, and they talked to some very nice, honest, seemingly nice, down-to-earth working people in like places like Ohio or Iowa, and I see talking some of the people I'm thinking in my head, there's almost like a naivete to like they actually think that the things he says that he's going to do to make the country better are actually going to happen, and I'm just like, they're not.
It's magical thinking at its most extreme. I think like, oh, he's a magician.
Yeah.
And I don't know where they believe it. I have just kind of finally come to rest on this idea, and that is every vote for the man consists of three things in varying proportions depending on who you're talking to. Ignorance, malevolence, and greed. To the degree that they're poor, it's going to be more ignorance and malevolence. And I don't mean ignorant like I'm a hillbilly dirt. I mean ignorant of the facts. They don't know. Like the dictionary definition of ignorant. They simply don't know, and they don't seem to care when they uncover them.
Right.
So in every vote for him, to me, boils down to those three things, and I have not found an exception. Not one. Because if it's, oh, well, I didn't know he wasn't a successful businessman, that's ignorance.
Yeah.
If I didn't care, that's a more vitriolic form of ignorance, and now we're into malevolence.
Yeah.
Because you don't care that he was wrong about this. You're just okay that nothing is going to happen to you. And that's where he's losing support. And he's losing support stepwise, piece by piece in places where people are finally being affected by his policies.
Yeah.
The farmers and the truckers are up in arms right now because his trade tariffs. Yeah, but you wanted somebody who was going to be a big tough guy on the world scene. Now you've got it, but it's affecting you, so now you're mad. It's not kids in cages. That's not a problem.
Right.
I mean, or the horrendous treatment that he's directed at people who have sex abuse claims and things like that. So I have boiled it down to that. It's where I live right now, and I don't know that I'm ever going to escape that.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong at all.
We'll see.
Yeah,
I would, because I've got some family members who voted for him, and you're talking, and I have absolutely just said no, not until I don't really need you. I mean, you're my family, but why would I have a relationship with someone I fundamentally don't respect or like? I wouldn't do that out in the real world. I wouldn't have you close to me. So why now? Just because your family doesn't change that for me.
That is something I agree with completely. I know lots of people who are their family members are objectively bad people. That they hang around. I'm like, just you don't need that in your life.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's an individual thing. It has nothing to do with family. I've got friends in my life that I'll have forever, and that's who I look to. That's the core.
Same.
Everybody else, you're either constructive in my life or you're not in it. Or I just have a casual link, because there's a lot of comics out in the world that we're not close with. You and I are, we've got a history. There are some people that we're much closer with in comedy,
yeah,
and you want to keep them around. Then there are others that I see that person. I'm glad to see them, but They're not
you're not calling them at 3 a.m.
They're not part of my fabric, in the
Sure.
world. They're part of the family, and we respect them, and we wish them well. But beyond that, it's like, 3 a.m. when I wake up with a panic attack, I'm not dialing that person like, hey, I saw you at a mic the other night. Can I talk to you about it?
Totally.
I really like that joke you did about zombies.
Okay, so your folks get divorced when you're a teenager. So so going through that, and then after college, after you get out of high school, do you go to college? What happens next?
Oh, after I got out of high school, I just fucked around for a couple years. I had no idea where I was going. I had a guitar sitting around the house, and I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'm going to go get high with my friends right now and party. Because you got to do the party part before you do the practice.
Of course.
Because otherwise, how are you going to be a successful musician? Duh.
Yeah.
Because the really good ones were doing exactly that, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
They weren't practicing 12 hours a day like Steve Vai.
Right. Yeah. Steve Vai practiced so much, 6 strings wasn't enough. He was like, let me add a 7.
I need 7. Wait, do you have an 8th? Bring it. Give me me that low B.
Yeah. And let me cut a handle into my guitar also. And paint it green.
He's such a monster. Have you seen him recently?
Not recently.
He's still it's ridiculous how amazing he is. I saw him on the G3 tour years ago in Denver. It was him, Eric Johnson, Satriani, Adrian Legg, and might have been someone else. Eric, did I say Eric Johnson?
I think you did.
Yeah. It was that group of monsters. And my friend Chris at the time, this guy, he's a guitar player. He's an extraordinary guitar player. He's one of those fucking jerks with perfect pitch. You could just listen to like polytonal classical music and pick out the keys. Like,
right. Like those people that can like listen to like a intricate piece of classical music once and then play it back to you perfectly.
I watched him transcribe Mystical Potato Head Groove Thing from Joe Satriani just as something he did while he was waiting for me to get ready for us to go out.
Jesus.
It was ridiculous. He's like, oh yeah. What? Could you have some respect for people who can't do that? That's just rude right here in my living room. I've got the guitar. I'm struggling to get, just a one-note version or a single-note version of the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
And Chris is transcribing some of the best shredding guitar from the 80s and 90s in his spare time.
Yeah, in his spare time.
Just for fun.
Yeah. Like in what was that movie, Amadeus, when Mozart comes in and he takes the very simple piece of music that guy wrote, and then he starts playing the and he starts extrapolating on it, makes this crazy thing, and then he's just like, and then the other guy's just like smashing stuff.
It's Solieri.
Solieri.
Yeah. There's such a funny line in that scene. I can see that scene in my head because it's stuck in my brain. Because he's playing. He's like, yeah, this is a funny little tune, and then he hits that chord. He goes, yeah, that.
It
doesn't quite work, does it? And then he changes it and just starts shredding, and the guy's like, fuck.
Yeah.
God dang it.
That is something that would have upset me in high school greatly. But my band now, I could just go to like, hey, I have this riff. Can you make it sound different and more interesting? And my guitarist is like, okay.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I got you.
I got you good.
So was music for you early on? Was that the dream?
Probably, but not anything close to the reality. I have an okay ear. I don't think I've worked as hard on it as I should have. But I came to it when I was 18. I was like, I enjoy this, and it's still in my life, and I'm glad it is. And now I'm playing bass. I've got a couple of songs down on the bass. I can play Maroon 5's "Harder to Breathe."
That's
I'm working
riff.
on "Holy Diver."
That's a good
I
one.
got the bass line down from Bush's "Come Down."
Oh yeah, won't you come back down? Yeah, I know.
I
what you're
don't want to
talking
come
about.
back down from this cloud, and that is a great song to me.
Oh yeah,
but I'm not sure. But the bass line might have been ripped off from Stand By. It's a Bon Jovi song.
Bon Jovi song. Okay,
"Living on a Prayer."
Living on a Prayer.
There's a silly do 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 do. That's "Living on a Prayer." Bush's is do 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 do.
It's
They just
very
keep,
similar.
They're very close. It's not quite Vanilla Ice and Rick James kind of thing, or David Bowie.
David Bowie, yeah,
Rick James, because Vanilla Ice stole Rick James's stuff.
I think you're thinking of MC Hammer, but that was that's a sample. That I don't think Rick. I think everyone knew that was Rick James.
Vanilla Ice tried to defend it. And have you seen that video of him defending?
Oh yeah, where he's like,
it's so
he tries
funny.
to say the added note is like where he's doing the ding 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 ding. Yeah, that's
so
been a
classic.
favorite. That's been a favorite of mine for so long. Well,
that's like when you're busted doing something cold. That's a perfect example of how everybody acts when they're busted cold. They're like, no, I didn't. Well, I did it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you that I didn't do it by explaining that I did it.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
that's
good
how
job, Robert Van Winkle.
Right. Oh, that's how I felt, because I tweet most of the jokes I tweet are about music, and I figure this is going to come up sooner or later. So like, I've never tweeted. I hate putting jokes on the internet because it suddenly becomes a topic of discussion. Where I was. Because I feel like most people would think that I didn't seriously mean that heavy metal is exactly the same as surf rock.
I knew exactly what you were talking about when I saw it, because I could hear it. But I was like, no, we're gonna argue about that, because
oh my god,
there is no relationship between the Beach Boys and Disturbed.
But in my defense, musically, if you listen to that song Pipeline. That dun 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 dun, that's just going like E to G, and there are lots of metal songs that go E to G.
Yeah.
And then like heavy metal without like an E5 where you're just like do, 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 do. You know what, that cuts out like 85% of all metal songs. And then and then surf rock, there's lots of like E minors. So I feel like there's some more similarities than I was giving credit for, especially like if you take like a Dick Dale song and then listen to like some brutal technical death metal, lots of like it's just difference between if it's like doomy sounding or if it's happy sounding.
And I think if you sat here with like a Kirk Hammett or Alex Skolnick or the Guitar Gods from the kind of music that you and I enjoy, they would say, yeah, I listen to the Beach Boys. I transcribe these songs because there's some good songwriting in there and some good guitar playing. So, of course, they're going to be interested in it, and it will have infused itself into their style because you can't avoid it. If you learn a song, it's going to be part of your musical thing no matter what.
Oh, 100%.
I think it's just in your musical DNA at that point, and you don't know how it's going to manifest. Like, you don't know how riffing on stage is going to manifest in a new joke, or how we're simply just sitting down and writing about something will come up with a new line. It's just it'll just become part of it.
100%.
Yeah.
So this is how I want to trace. So you play sports early on as a kid. You're an athletic dude. You're an athletic dude. How do you come to stand-up comedy? When does that happen?
I'm in reasonably good shape now. I'm not as athletic as I used to be. The ankle injury, I got my foot stuck in the gap a couple of years ago and broke it in 3 places, or fractured the ankle in 3 places. So, yeah, it wasn't fun. But I played sports as a kid. Baseball all the way from 3rd grade up. But in the 2nd grade, I got this report card, and I remember it very distinctly. We were living in Alaska in apartment 4 Pine Street. I have these weird details stuck in my brain.
Yeah. How did you like Alaska?
I was 5. I wanted to go where my dad was going. And my dad chose Alaska in the military. And he chose it because he was a big game hunter, and we were fishermen.
Right.
So where else would you choose? I mean, I'm going to go hunt the biggest bears and the biggest moose on the planet, and I'm going to take the biggest fish out of the fastest rivers in the coldest temperatures. That's what I thought
we have so many.
It was all about.
We have so many similarities. We were doing a lot of the same stuff. I was doing
a slightly different climate.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dad, and it's kind of a funny story. I mean, it's funny if you're not my teenage sisters, but it has nothing to do with the other P in his life. He was given a choice of duty stations, circa 1974 before we moved. Right. They're like, all right, so when you're done with training in Alabama, you can go these places, Hawaii or Alaska. And my dad simply told my mom and my sisters, yeah, we got stationed in Alaska. He didn't even tell them we had a choice. And they didn't know that we had a choice until we got to Alaska. And then some paperwork slipped out of an attaché kind of thing.
Sure.
My mom was like, whoa! I'd be a radically different person.
Oh, my
I
God.
can't imagine how different I'd be. I don't know if I'd be living here or if I'd be,
Oh my God, if I was doing this podcast with Hawaiian Troy Allen, that would be
a weird guy.
such a different thing.
I don't know if I'd be a surfer. I don't know what I'd be doing.
We'd probably be talking about like, slack key guitar,
Yeah, maybe a ukulele.
Yeah.
What was that guy's name? That really big dude that played the ukulele. He's passed away now, but he was like a folk singer in Hawaii. Is it Hawaii? Is he from?
I think so.
He's got every letter in the alphabet is in his name twice.
I know who you're talking about. I cannot remember his name. When I think of like Hawaiian music, all I think of is Herb Tijuana and the Tijuana Brass Orchestra.
Oh, okay, yeah. But back to your question about how I became a comedian. In second grade, I had this report card, and I had mediocre grades. I was never a great student until I got into college, and then it was my time. And now I'm like, I've got to make the best of this.
Right.
But there was a thing on the bottom of my report card that said he has a keen sense of humor. And I mistook the word keen to mean king, like a king's sense of humor. And I was like, and all I could see was like, what does that mean? It didn't make any sense. I was like, Are kings funny? I don't know about this. That was the first time anybody ever told me publicly I was funny. It hasn't happened since. It was just that one time, and then a couple people from the Fringe wrote nice reviews for me. But then I take them with the same, that's as important to me.
Sure.
Because I like all those comments. But
yeah,
I never did anything. There was never any theater in my life as a kid. That was not encouraged in the house. And it was implicitly discouraged. My dad had this thing that everybody in show business was homosexual. And I didn't realize how it affected me until I was older. But when I was younger, he'd come in, I'd be watching, I don't know, Chips, with Eric Estrada and that other guy. I forget his name.
Right.
And I love that show. They were hero cops. This is cool. Eric Estrada's a cool dude. And they ride motorcycles, and they've got women. And my dad would walk in, and excuse the F-bomb here, but he'd walk in, he'd go, faggots, and walk out.
Jesus.
And I'm looking around like, and I guess I was something wrong with me because I didn't take it figuratively. I was like, and every time, I can remember so many times when if like a famous band, AC/DC, Kiss, anybody, fucking homos. And when you're young enough, or just dumb enough, I guess, to believe that, I didn't know that they weren't. So I looked at I looked at art, performers, musicians, actors. I was like, they're all homosexual. Well, no, okay. And I didn't know that, but I guess they all are, because that's what my dad says every time. I don't know when I figured out that was bullshit.
That is some deep brain fucking, especially considering the
source. And it's partial, and it is, but it's also, I don't think he intended to paint the whole world that way. It was his own bullshit. Yeah. Because my dad was something of a guitar player when he was a kid, but he could never do it in front of a crowd because he was too nervous. In that light, now I understand the comment. Now he's just mad at people that are doing the things that he didn't take the chance to do.
Yeah.
Or maybe he never had the chance because he came from his own mess to be, to shed some human light. My dad he was in foster homes a lot as a kid, several of them.
Yeah.
He was abused by his own father horribly. His mom was a complete monster.
Yeah.
But, that was just coming from his own unwillingness to go out and try this thing, or guilt for not having tried it, whatever it is. That's what it's wrapped up in. So I look at it in that context now, not as my dad trying to pervert my brain and make me think that.
Of course, yeah.
Because in my dad's worst moments, he's bad, but I've seen him have really human moments, and I don't know that there's homophobia in him necessarily. There's homophobia, but I don't think malice, if that makes any sense. He's got that prejudice. He's like, I don't understand it, but I've seen him treat gay people and the gay community with a lot of respect, and I was like, okay, so I guess that's in him. It's in him to be better. He doesn't indulge it much, but it's in him. So there's that little piece of humanity. We got to rest our hats on that and be like, all right, Trump. Here's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Here's my profound thought. No matter how bad we think he is, he exists on the human spectrum of behavior. He's possible for all of us. Being that person is possible for everybody.
Yeah.
That's what I always when I just have lost all hope, I'm like, all right, but that is an expression of humanity on the spectrum.
I agree with that.
It's there, and we cannot avoid it. So to try to dehumanize these people, my dad, whomever you hate, all you're doing is diminishing your own capacity and denying the possibility that could have been you.
Yeah.
With just a different gene expression from your genome, one different protein, and you're that guy.
Yeah.
So I try to keep that in mind and just be thankful that at least I've got some heart in me left and some self-awareness that I don't become that person, but it's possible for everybody.
100%. I try very hard not to remember that also. My fiance a lot of times says that I have a lot of childlike wonder because I just will randomly exclaim when we're like walking around like, oh, squirrel, or like it manifests as like ADD.
Funny.
And so so I have all of the experience to be kind of a cynical, joyless person, but I don't want to be that.
No, who does?
And I let a lot of stuff like fuck up my way of thinking about a lot of things for a long time, and I'm trying to fight. That's why I changed the name of my show to like Fighting My Wiring, because I'm actively like in my brain just like pull that out and then let's try plugging it in here, like that kind of.
Well, and
shit is where I'm at now.
That's a good analogy, but it's also there's science behind it. In terms of you can rewire your brain, you can do things to change how you react to situations. And I'm preaching this knowing fully from the standpoint that I don't exercise it as much as I should, but it's absolutely possible to go out there and change your brain, change the way you respond to things, and change your circuitry. It just takes a long time, and it should, because the circuitry that you've got now has been getting reinforced every day that you've not been paying attention to that circuitry. So why would you think you could just, it's not, as simple as unplug from the box and plug it into another hole. It's unplug it, have to leave it out, and then try to build another outlet or something. Yeah. That's not a very clear analogy, but you get what I'm saying.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I haven't been grounded. Maybe I should be grounded for once. Yeah. So then when you're growing up, because I remember not really understanding what stand-up comedy was for a while, even like until like my tween or teenage years. Although they weren't saying tweens when I was like 12 and 11. No. What was your like first like conscious thought of what stand-up was and I want to do that?
Probably Eddie Murphy's Delirious or Raw. Which one came out first? Delirious. Yeah, probably Delirious. Eddie Murphy's Delirious, but maybe more Raw, because I don't know when or how I saw Delirious. I may have seen it on HBO at the time when HBO showed movies. Yeah. When it was just movies. And the one time I remember thinking, God, I really like that is Raw. Yeah. And I was in the front row with my friend Teddy, Mike Fastnight, who's the guy who passed away in February, actually. I think they were there, and Mark Pearson. And I remember this so clearly because Everclear was a thing at the time. We were sneaking, and Jungle Juice, I don't know if it still is, we pour Everclear into Kool-Aid and with some fruit, and they called it Jungle Juice. But we snuck a little 200 milliliter bottle of Everclear in, and we're pouring it in our Cokes because we were very clever. Yay, we got away with sneaking 200 milliliters of grain alcohol into the movie theater. And then the guy sitting next to us, I think he was to my right, lit up a bong. he took a hit off a bowl right in the front row of the movie theater in Eddie Murphy Raw, and he didn't know us, and he just said, "Hey, man, you want to hit this?" I was like, "Fuck yeah, I want to hit that." Yeah, I want to get high in the movie theater watching that. This is the best case scenario. Right. We brought in 200 milliliters. This guy brought in weed. This dude's got it figured out. So we just, and I know at the time, I think, Teddy was looking at the Air Force. Mike and Mark, there's no way they would have ever tried weed. They stayed clear of it. Mark Pearson, I think, took a hit. He's in the military now. It's probably ruined his career.
There's lots of
yeah, I think he's going to be okay. Yeah. But we all got high in the front, and I remember thinking, man, that's like the coolest thing ever. This guy is the coolest thing ever. I've got to go back and watch that special because, as much of a fan as I am, and certainly was as a teenager of Eddie Murphy, I'm not sure going back and listening. Some of the bits will hold up, but I think some of you are going to be like, woo. Yeah. You couldn't do that on stage today. You would get Me Too'd right off the thing.
Oh, 100%. Well, he definitely threw faggot around quite a bit.
He did.
In that special. So that's not great. But
and at the time, it was perfect. It wasn't normal. Okay for that community at all. It's never been okay. That's a horrible word for the community. But that time, you didn't walk out of the house without saying that word probably if you were just middle America kid.
Yeah.
You know, you with parents who really weren't paying attention all that much. So,
100%.
Have you ever read Pryor Convictions?
No, I've always wanted to. I can't
Richard
find
Pryor's.
it anywhere.
I've got a copy of it if you want to borrow it.
Dude, thank you.
It's because it's a
love
great
to.
book to read, and he says something very interesting in there because Pryor's no choir boy, and you'll read a lot about his childhood there, and some of it's not surprise or some of it but some of the other stuff is like, holy hell, that guy. No wonder he writes the jokes he writes.
Right.
And I opened my show with a contrast of him and Jerry Seinfeld. Because you're fucked up, so that's why you're funny. No, you're born this way. Your life informs your humor.
Yes.
Is where I'm going to stand on that. And the evidence is those two, because Jerry Seinfeld's life was like, we grew up in Massapequa, New York, with married parents, and he loved his dad. Like, boo! That's not the profile of a comic. We've got our daddy issues. This is good. Jerry,
exactly.
No. But I saw him do, and in the show I do the material. I just say I saw him do 10 minutes on raisins, and that's how you get a comedian who's good like that.
Yeah,
I think they have a normal, and so they find humor in the everyday. Richard Pryor grew up in the house he grew up in, and his most famous, not his most famous bit, but one of the more famous is when he sets himself on fire smoking crack.
Yep.
Okay, see the difference? This is where you get your changes in comedy.
Yeah.
But he says something very interesting about Eddie Murphy, and I'm not sure if this is a quote, but he said he never really watched much of his stand-up because he thought he was mean. Yeah.
Richard Pryor said this about Eddie
Pryor
Murphy.
said that about Eddie Murphy, a man who's never referred to a woman without using the word bitch or hoe.
Right.
Called Eddie Murphy mean.
That's
and I thought
really
that was
interesting.
the very interesting, difference in perspective or like sensitivity to what he was saying. And all that, when I think back on, Eddie's material early, you can't date a girl who hangs out with those, F-bombs because they come up with that AIDS shit on her lips. Well, that was at a time when, we didn't understand AIDS, and that came out of the ignorance of the era.
Right.
And I don't know if that's what he's talking about, or if he had a different perspective on it, because he doesn't really get into it too much. But he did mention, and I thought that was kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I've never thought Eddie Murphy as being mean. I just thought, he's Eddie Murphy at the time.
Yeah.
He's a Long Island guy in 1985.
You can put them together.
Yeah.
I'll say I probably watched Delirious like last year again, and like the family barbecue bit still holds up very well. The ice cream truck bit,
that stuff is great.
All very good. Those I think are still classic bits, and I think he's even said like, I feel sorry about a lot of the things I said on some of those specials. So
and I don't hold them against him at all.
Yeah, me
I
neither.
just look back and I'm like, okay, now that I do this, and I've got my own conscience and my own ethic when I'm writing a joke and things I try not to do.
Yeah.
When I'm writing, I write freely and then I try to edit with a conscience.
Yeah.
If I can.
It's pretty good.
And I look back on that and I go, yeah. I would have probably done the exact same material.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stand here and say, I would have been more progressive. I would not have been. I probably would have been worse.
Yeah.
I didn't come around to being progressive until I was older and had been through some shit and had to develop compassion for those around me who were going through it because I'd felt it myself.
Exactly. You got to get kicked around by it. You got to get kicked around by life a little bit. That's how you develop empathy.
I hope so.
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
So when did you start comedy? Because
not until I moved to New York.
And
I did it. I came up here. I did improv comedy off and on for years before, like short form improv comedy sports at a place called Fiore's in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
And
so you eventually do move to Denver.
Well, yeah, I moved to Denver when I was 21. I moved out of the house when I was 21 because winter, and moved to Denver, and then I went up there. I was like, well, I'm going to try to focus on something creative. I wanted, guitar. Maybe I'll just put my effort into it and try to get somewhere with this. And that was never going to happen. And then I got arrested and spent 2 days in jail. And then I got out, signed up for community college classes, and started a degree in music that turned into a degree in finance, that turned into a job in finance, that turned into me putting off what I've been really wanting to do my entire life for a life that I thought would make my family happy and would make me feel like I've escaped.
Sure.
I made it out. Look at me. I'm got this tie. I work on the 12th floor. Our office boardroom looks out over the Rocky Mountains, and I'm sitting across from a guy who's worth $2 billion, and he's asking me if I can give him money. I'm here. I've arrived. This is the Troy that I want to be my entire life. And I wouldn't do anything but choke that fucker to the ground.
Right.
If I could meet myself in that moment, I would just slap me in the face and drag me outside. Like, no, bad blue-collar boy trying to be white-collar. You know that doesn't work. There's a caste system in this country, and you're not part of it.
Yeah, there is.
You're a lower caste, so get out of here.
Yeah.
I'm definitely blue-collar. Mm-hmm. I'm educated and all that, but I'm I can try and bleach it all I want, but it's still... You can still see the color in it.
Yeah, I relate 100%. Even when I've had jobs where I get to sit at a desk, I still kind of approach it the same way. It's like, all right, let's move. My first job, I was like, okay, I'm gonna move all this mulch to a different pile where we keep the mulch pile, and then okay, so all right, so you need 20 bags of mulch. All right, I'm going to put these 20 bags of mulch in your truck, and my manager's going to tell me about his time in Vietnam killing people. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, that's going to be fun.
That was my first
I think all jobs that are like that can be boiled down to you're moving mulch. I think that's a great metaphor for all office jobs. You're just moving mulch. You're going to move that mulch from that file to that file.
It's just a different format of mulch.
Yeah.
It's been refined.
Yeah, this mulch happens to be, I don't know, accounting.
Right.
Move your accounting mulch over there, and they'll bring their accounting mulch over here. Yeah, I don't even think I could go back to that world and function normally now. Every once in a while you think, I'm just going to get a job and have some benefits and go try to be happy. And there's no fucking way. Yeah. I couldn't do it. Well, I could not work for someone else like that.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from completely. So, and then when did you get to New York?
2008. I moved up ahead of this past weekend marks 11 years in the city.
Excellent.
Yeah,
nice.
And I moved up that weekend. I started a new job. I was a personal trainer at the time, and I was working at the Upper East Side Sports Club LA. And I got an apartment at 72nd and 2nd. And I started that job, I think, September 2nd in 2008, just in time to watch the market fall in on itself.
Right.
I was trying to build a client base as a personal trainer because you don't just show up and you've got business. You show up, you have to build it. Yeah. And I did that really successfully in DC. It took me no time at all. My first year as a trainer, I made like $60,000 just because I could go in. I had business experience. I could talk to people about something other than parties and working out, and I had my own weight problem at the time. I was 262 pounds, and I'm about 215 now.
Yeah,
but I was kind of a chunky guy.
Yeah,
and people would see me, and I'd still be working out. They'd be like, "Oh, I'll work out." That's not a very impossible standard. I could look like that guy. I think I'll pay him to get me to look exactly that good, and then nothing better. But I built the business up quick, and I thought, I'll go to New York, do the same thing. And there's no reason I can't do it here. And then financial crisis. And then it was a part-time job working for a marketing firm, and then anything else I could do. And I had some clients still, but it was tough to build business. And finally got back on my feet like the end of 2009, and then really started comedy in 2010. I did a bringer show at the end of 2008 at Gotham, and then one or two during 2009, not enough to really say I'm doing a lot of comedy. I was just doing it every once in a while. And then 2010 came around. I said, all right, I'm doing well enough that I should do this and dedicate myself to something for the first time in my silly, ridiculous, what do you call it?
Life?
Life, but I was going to modify life with I was lived as an audience member. I've always observed that. I've seen it from the outside, and I was like, let's just go put your foot in a little closer to the fire. Yeah. Because I don't think in my entire life I've ever been fully committed to anything. I've always got like a toe in it, and I'm like, how's this feel? Is that water okay? And then I'll put my whole foot in it and be like, I know what that means. Yeah. I know what that experience is.
And then so eventually you're just like, it's cold. I feel like it'll be cold. And then eventually you're just like, screw it, head first.
Well, I don't think I've ever done anything head first. Even in comedy at this point, I feel like there's a little piece of me that holds back from the world. It's like I'm watching everything from the outside. I'm more a spectator than I ever have been. A full-on participant in life is what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not unique in that, but I don't know what kind of brain it produces. I don't know what kind of life it gives you.
I feel like it would produce. It would definitely. I feel like it would produce a good brain for definitely like observing and pondering, which I think is important for comedy.
Yeah.
Certainly, you need that sort of like. And then there's also that kind of that twisted need for confrontation for some comics. I'm not that person. I'm not that.
What do you mean twisted need for confrontation?
Well, I was thinking like the contrarian thing. Like I'm not a super contrarian stand-up comedian. I do like to occasionally say things that sound off because I know it's going to get a certain reaction.
Sure,
But I always like to say it in a way where it's either where I'm actually saying something kind of intelligent, or it's so stupid that
it's perceived to be just whimsical.
Correct.
Yeah, they're like, okay, that's so absurd that this guy's just being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, because I don't think I'm a contrarian guy.
I don't think you are. No.
I'm not that way. I'm not inherently confrontational. Although I know I have the reputation of being an angry guy. That's not necessarily confrontational. That's an emotional state. It's not. Because I look at people who, like to call themselves, I don't know, maybe provocateur or devil's advocate, and I've never taken that to mean anything other than I don't have anything to add to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go 180 degrees and say this and see what it does.
Yeah.
I'm interested not in contrarian, but in a new angle. That's what I want to see. When I'm watching a comedian, I want to hear them, oh, okay, so they're focusing on this part of that. It's not contrarian. It's just a new angle. That's where the good stuff is. When I see a comedian make a new angle out of even the oldest, hackiest premise.
Mm-hmm.
Show me a new angle. It's not hack anymore. You've done something good.
Yeah,
and that's what I look for. I don't care if somebody can go up and go be pro-Trump on stage just because it's contrarian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but are you adding anything in this process? I'm a devil's advocate. Well, that's easy.
Yeah.
You're just flipping a coin and reading what's on the other side.
Yeah.
You're not bringing anything. You're not adding to it. You're not stimulating anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're just being a roadblock in progress for the sake of it.
Right. And
I'm thinking of Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yeah, there's nothing to back that up. Or the metaphor I say the thing I rail against a lot are open micers that only see the surface level of Bill Burr or Patrice O'Neill and don't see like the nuance or anything else about what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's who I rail against the most.
Yeah, well, they have this kind of
life.
like a knee-jerk reaction. It's a triggered thing, and I don't like the word, but they miss context, it seems like. Because I've seen Bill live.
Mm-hmm,
I saw him at
too.
Madison Square Garden. Did you see him when he was doing the round?
Yeah.
You were there?
Oh, I saw him when he was touring. It was the set that became his Netflix special in his most recent Netflix special, not the
Paper
one that's
Tiger.
No, it was the one he did in Nashville. So it was like,
oh, okay, yeah.
So it was like the stuff about blowing up cruise ships and about as a way of controlling overpopulation.
Yeah, I just love him because he's not contrarian, but he opens these jokes a lot. He'll just open a bit with something so shocking. You're like, what? I love the bit when he's like, I'm going to get a gun.
Yeah.
And you're like, here we go. What does he say? And then he makes some really funny points and he moves on. But he likes to get your attention with something so shocking. And he did it at MSG. And I had 12th row tickets. It was awesome.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah. And he opens it up. He's like, hey, thanks for coming out, everybody. It's great. And you women, so brave. Coming out on your own, go to the ATM, get some money, buy a ticket all by yourself, and you show up here. And I'm like, oh no, we're going to be fighting our way out of here. It's just going to be, there's going to be some women that just storm the stage.
Right.
And I know he's not doing it to be a misogynist dick. He's just doing it to rile up. And then he made some really funny points about, some of the movements going on. I don't know if he specifically got into Me Too, but he got into some things and he made some legit good points. Like he did when he says, I hate it when people say you should never hit a woman. Never! And he starts pounding on the word never, and I think that that's a lesson for comics in general. When there's an absolute being presented,
Yeah.
there's opportunities for jokes because there's always going to be exceptions. There's very few just pure absolutes in the world.
100%.
And if you can find the funny exception and make it so absurd to simply have said that in the first place, that's where the joke is for me. And that's what he did with that. I was like,
Yeah.
never hit a woman. What if she did? And he lists a situation where you'd punch anybody. You'd punch a baby.
Yeah.
He could probably make you justify that.
Yeah. And again, it's that fresh angle. I love stuff like that where my favorite thing is to hear a joke and then go, I never thought about that topic like that.
Yeah.
That is great. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And
then
then
I wonder. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And then there's part of me that's like, oh, I got to work harder.
Yeah, that's all. That's always there. And we could talk about Chappelle's special and how I think he comes to some different angles on some stuff. And then, I'll be frank, I enjoyed the special. I'm a fan of Dave Chappelle.
Mm-hmm. I'm a fan of Dave Chappelle.
I didn't like some of this last special,
Mm-hmm.
but I laughed at some part of every bit. Because I think he got to some funny stuff, even though he went over some rough areas and some things. I'm like, okay, but I still laughed in places.
Yes,
and I laughed at pretty much every bit in some way, and I really dug the LGBTQ bit.
Yeah, that was
that car analogy.
That was a great bit. The car analogy.
And my own sense is that, I think if you've got friends in that community, which if you live in the city and don't, what the fuck.
Right.
I think that he touched on some things that I've heard from my friends in those communities about how they interact.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, well, I mean, I didn't hear anything that was malicious. I didn't hear anything that was cheap.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, man, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not my place to be mad about the joke, but I didn't really care for the Michael Jackson. I didn't care for that chunk much. There was some funny stuff in that because it is funny for a kid to go to school. Oh, Michael Jackson sucked my dick.
Yeah,
okay, that's what you probably would brag about that if it was anything other than what had happened. But
of course.
So my family history, I look at that and I leave my baggage out of it. I can listen to jokes about pedophilia and incest all day, as long as nobody's really being hurt in the joke. Then when they're saying they should do it, I'm like, okay, now that's weird. Yeah. But if you're finding the absurdity in the aftermath, now I'm on board. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit of that absurdity.
Yeah.
I got to meet Michael Jackson is one thing.
How? Oh, well, let me tell you.
Interesting.
The one joke, and this is it's the joke that opens the special. The one that probably is like the one that like stung a little bit for me was like I was like I do see what you're trying to say. I also think that a lot of what he was doing is kind of sticking his finger in a lot of people's faces.
He totally was. He was putting down a marker for comedians.
I think so.
Yeah.
But the joke that opened the special where he's talking about Anthony Bourdain and then he talks about his friend, I was like, I know what you're saying.
That one hit you. See, I liked that one better than some of the others because it's a neat contrast. It's like. Why do people with such great lives kill themselves? And I don't know, I forget all of the bit, but I'm like, okay, well, that is an interesting question because Anthony Bourdain did have it all.
Yeah.
From the outside. He didn't have mental health at all. And we know that now.
Yeah.
But he did have a kick-ass job. I still watch Unknown Parts because it was an amazing show.
Mm-hmm. I still watch it too.
He did amazing things with just food. And I'd seen him on TV and I never really just crusty old... He's an professional asshole for its own sake. That's just kind of my first impressions of him.
Yeah.
And then I watched the show. I was like, this dude is erudite. He's worldly. He's traveled. He's thoughtful. He writes really well.
Yep.
I've read his book, Kitchen Confidential, just recently.
Oh, that book's great.
And he's doing amazing things. Of course, he also is a little privileged, too. He didn't come from, hey, we're poor and scraping by.
Yeah.
He had some opportunities, and, that always diminishes
had
things
some opportunities,
for me.
and then there's a couple lucky breaks there.
Yep. And he's worked his ass off for a lot of things. He wrote a book. That's not didn't do shit.
Yeah.
That's not sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because he didn't ghostwrite that. Nobody ghost wrote that for him. He wrote that shit.
Yeah. And he had and also like he had a blue collar job for like 30 years.
Well, yeah, his entire career.
Entire career. He's just on his feet in hot kitchens.
And it blows me away that we call being a chef a blue collar job. I mean, because it is I guess a trade craft, but it's a really important job. I mean, really, really complicated job. To be good at being a chef is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a good cook. That just means you can follow instructions.
Yeah.
This guy was a chef, and you watch those
That's
shows
that's
about
actually
chefs.
a good point that you're making. Chef, there's more creativity
Yeah,
in being called a chef than working as a line cook.
Yeah,
that is true.
The knowledge that you have to have, the skill set. Maybe it's, I guess, all blue collar, but that to me is that caste system, that class thing that just bothers me, because why can't we just respect the artist? Because that's an artist right there.
Yeah.
And are artists blue collar?
Can I tell you exactly what I was the thought that had in my head when I said that? I guess there's a part of me that views any kind of physically demanding job as a blue collar job, when that's probably not always the case. Probably is for a lot of stuff, but probably isn't for a lot of things. Because if you watch like Top Chef or even like Chopped, when it's like, okay, here's like 4 things that have seemingly nothing to do with each other, but I'm going to use all of my knowledge of how to prepare these ingredients, but also combine them in a way that it's going to make sense and also taste good, so I can win this money.
It blows me away. I watch cooking shows. They're my default when I smoke weed just to go to sleep at night. I don't like it recreationally, but I'll put that on, BoJack Horseman, something like that, or a cooking show. And I just watched one. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like the anti-reality show, because everybody on the show, they were in competition, but there was nothing cutthroat about it. They were supportive of each other, and when one lost, they were like, "Oh man, that's terrible." And then the one guy who won, everybody was collegial. I was like, "This is a nice break from American culture." We have to turn everything into a fucking blood sport.
Yeah,
you can't just have a cooking show. It's got to be like cupcake muffin throwdown. And okay,
that's why I like Great British Baking, because everyone's very sincere and nice on that show.
I haven't seen it, but there's this guy, the chef, and I can't think of his name because I don't remember these details, but I think he's from Peru. And all of his food is a reflection of all of the strata in Peru, like the different environmental conditions, because they've got all these different like ecosystems, and he crafts his food to reflect all of that about Peru. And he goes to the ocean, and you'll see the next dish looks like the landscape that he came from, and he puts food on it to look like crabs on the rocks and stuff like that. It's amazing. I don't know what it tastes like.
Right.
But the creativity and the intelligence in it is just so inspiring to me. Like, that is amazing. How does anybody get that dedicated to anything? I don't know what that feels like, and I do want to know what that feels like someday, but I don't.
Yeah.
And I just watch them with marvel. I'm like, wow, your entire life is that. And it's beautiful, and that's why you produce shit like this.
100%. Same way with like Steve Vai or like Yingwei. Even though he's kind of a psychopath, they love that thing they do so much that they just are completely in it, and what they create is a reflection of that. And
the song, the Steve Vai tune, "For the Love of God."
Yeah.
Have you heard the story about how he recorded that?
I don't think so.
It's something like he fasted for 3 days. He practiced, wrote the song, practiced, then he fasted for 3 days and then went in and recorded it. And,
wow.
And now you got "For the Love of God." And if you can listen to that song and not be impressed by it, I don't know what you're impressed by, because it's an extraordinary piece of guitar orchestration.
100%.
And he approaches it with his whole mind and spirit, and that's what that produces. Whether you like it or not, you can't deny the guy's mastery of the instrument.
100%.
And that's what that kind of thing produces. The same with that chef, and I see that across the board with artists across everywhere, famously just completely obsessed with it. And a lot of them are still mentally healthy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be that you lose yourself in the obsession, like people think. Oh, right. You're just going to lose yourself in that, and you're going to become a Van Gogh. That's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do without the being shot by some teenagers in a field.
Yeah.
Did you know that was a theory about his death?
I did not know that.
Watch Loving Vincent.
Oh, that rotoscoped or that hand-painted movie?
Yeah,
I wanted to see that because...
Watch it, and I'm sorry I just gave it away for everybody.
Oh,
it gets into a theory about how I had no idea that theory existed.
Oh, I'm going to...
And the film is...
Check that out.
Stunning visually. Do you smoke?
A little bit.
A little bit. Well, a little bit before this would be good because...
Okay, that's how I'm gonna.
The whole movie just kind of like undulates in his style of painting. It just kind of moves through, and they introduce characters from the iconic paintings, and it's really sweet.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
that's cool, man. One other thing, I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience at Fringe and the process of doing your show and planning that, because that's a goal for me eventually. And I know I've talked to Abigail Shaman a little bit about the way a lot of people do it to start is the free Fringe. But tell me about getting your show. Tell me about the genesis of your show and then getting it to Fringe and your experience there.
The show's called Funny Stories About Pain. And the genesis of it really has been something I've been thinking about for maybe 2 years now. Is just I want to do a one-man show or just an entire comedy show about the worst things that have happened in my life, because that's the tough stuff to make funny.
Yeah.
You gotta get past the surface level jokes and get into something real and dig into it. And I'm still not even, I don't even think 50% of the way into that process. I don't.
Yeah.
That's probably a wildly high estimation.
Sure.
Lofty estimation of how deep I am into it, but I thought, all right, I can do this. I've got some stories to tell. I've got jokes about it already.
Yeah.
So let's build the story behind the joke and not just tell the joke, which is always an abridged version of a story.
Yeah.
It's just, this is the truncate. This is the most concise form of the story.
Yep.
Missing a lot of details, but you still get the gist.
Yeah.
This, I wanted to expand it. So take the jokes and expand. Take the jokes I wrote about, my dad and that and his Parkinson's and when I fell and got my foot stuck in the gap at Queens Plaza. A daughter I gave up for adoption when I was 19. And I was like, I've got these stories. Can I do an entire show about these horrible things and make people laugh for 50 minutes? Not straight, because it's a storytelling show. So there's room in there for the profound moment, which I don't think I've discovered yet, or the pithy comment,
Sure, yeah. Storytelling, they give you that room to...
You get some latitude, and that's why I wanted to do it that way, because I feel like just straight stand-up would have been a disservice to the humanity in the story.
I would agree with that.
Because, stand-up is just like, hey, it's not deflection, but if it's all just rapid-fire jokes, I'm not getting into anything real, and I wanted to leave room for that on stage. Because I appreciate those moments, even when a stand-up comic does. It gives us something real. I'm like, that's I see the jokes, and that's funny. What's real here? And can you make a joke out of that? Which is why, I enjoyed Doug Stanhope so much. Because sometimes he does things you're just like, wow, that was... His bit about his mom killing herself.
Oh, my God, that's just... That's such a great bit.
It's a story. It's not funny all the way through. It's heart-wrenching, but it's hilarious. Hey, Mom, they found a cure. Fuck you.
So fucking funny. Fucking funny. And then it ends with
for people listening, if you don't know what special we're talking about, and that comment was totally out of context for you, Beer Hall Putsch.
Yes, Beer Hall Putsch, which is my favorite Stanhope album.
Yeah, he destroyed Occupy Wall Street. Not that it needed to be done, because we'd already, this was not the right plan, but when he contrasts it to what he contrasted it with.
His plan is really good.
It's like, God, that was amazing. And his plan for fixing things is kind of what I keep in mind when I don't make my student loan payments. I'm like, suck it.
It's like hashtag resist.
I am a rebel. Or I am incapable of paying. But so that's what I wanted to do. And I had all these stories, and I tried to put it up last year, and I got too late. I was going to do the free Fringe, and I got there too late, and they said, we don't have any really venues open for the kind of thing you want to do. And I said, okay, fine.
Okay.
December, there were some informational sessions, and there probably will be here. If you need to look for those, it's on the edfringe, edfringe.com, I think .com website.
Okay.
I can check that. But you can go there. They tell you how to put the show together, and there's informational sessions. They were in December. January, I reached out to a couple of the venues that were listed in this informational session, or I'd been introduced to, and one got back to me way too late, one didn't get back to me at all, and then another guy, just from the Space UK, he said, yeah, love the idea, because you're just pitching your show. It's not like a festival like Boston or JFL, where you submit, you go to the festival and things like that. This is, you pitch a show, and if they like it, they'll give you a venue. They looked at a tape of me to be sure that I was actually a performer and I could tell at least one joke in an 8-minute set.
Right.
Okay, all right, this guy's not going to run anybody out of here. But I made a contract because I didn't do the free Fringe. I didn't have one reason why or why not. I just didn't. I talked to this guy. He gave me a reasonable rate for 9 nights, which was about £750.
Okay.
And that's not $100 a night for a venue of 40 seats. Not bad. And in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'll easily get 20 people a night on average.
Yeah.
No problem. I shouldn't even worry about that. So went through the contract, got that, and then, there's a lot of steps along the way. I didn't realize how much work it was going to be, but there's always a deadline. So March, you got to have, you got to have some marketing materials or some legal paperwork done.
Yeah.
And then the next one. But that's all laid out for you pretty well. And they're good about, the Space UK was really good about communicating with me and saying, hey, this deadline's coming up. And I'd be like, I got to do something. And as it got closer, I was just kind of being a little lazy, to be honest. I was like, yeah, I know the stories I'm going to tell, and I'll just do these jokes leading up to the stories, because it wasn't all stories. I did open with some kind of a self-indulgent thing about the tragedy and comedy and all that stupid formula. Tragedy plus time equals comedy. No, it doesn't. It equals history.
Sure.
You got to write a joke to make it comedy.
Yep.
But I do a little thing about that, and then I do some jokes, stories, a few joke stories, just to kind of keep a different rhythm. It's a composition, if you want to be lofty about it. And I want to change up that feel. Yeah, because I can go da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then do the rapid-fire jokes again. But so I had that all laid out, and I really was like, I got this. I wasn't worried about it. I'll just do this in Edinburgh. And then like June rolled around. I was like, I just had a panic attack. Like, what the fuck? I had a real, and I think I told this on another podcast that I was on with a friend of mine. When I signed that contract, shortly after, I had one of the most intense panic attacks I've ever had. I've never had panic attacks until this, and and I've had little ones like, oh shit, but this was full on seizure. I was laying in my bed, and I could feel it coming on when I was going home. I felt like I was being followed the whole night.
Sure.
And I'd had a good night on stage, and there was no reason for me to be feeling bad, but I could feel something sneaking up behind me.
Right.
And I got home, I got high, got in bed, and then all of the stress of everything that's ever been wrong and could go wrong landed in my stomach at one point, and my arms came up like this, and my hands were these claws, and I was frozen. And I recognized it. I was like, shit, I can't move. And I just was like, okay, just relax. Breathe. And then my hands eventually let go, and I reached for my phone because one of my friends in Vegas is a nurse.
Yeah.
And I reached for my phone to call her because I was like, I'm dying. I got to call my friend Carol, and she's a nurse. She'll be able to help me. Because I was calling to see if I needed to go to the hospital. I was like, should this?
Right.
And I looked at my phone, and I couldn't see my phone because my vision had blurred.
Oh, my God.
So I had to wait for my vision to clear up. It took a few minutes. Then I called her, and I said, this is what's happening. And she talked me through it. She's like, look, this is just a panic attack. You don't need to go to the hospital. Your brain is attacking you. And that's why we call it an attack. Nothing you're feeling is rational. Nothing you're thinking is rational. It just feels perfectly clear to you right now. And it was it took like 40 minutes, and then I fell asleep on the phone with her, I'm pretty sure, because she talked me down through it. And then I wake up I'm sleeping and my phone's off. I'm like, oh, I guess we ended our conversation. She must have talked me through it.
Oh, that's a good friend.
Yeah, she's I've known her since 6th grade.
Wow.
So in June, it started, I was like, I have to put this, I'm going to be, I'm doing 50 minutes, 9 nights at a 4, and I'm freaking out. And just off a whim, I emailed Under St. Mark's. I was like, I need some dates to run my show, and they gave me like 8 dates. Just right as all right, here it is. It's like, huh, what? And then I got another date at QED.
Great place.
Yeah, it's a great place. And that was one of the last times I ran it. But and then I had to put the show together because I only had 50 minutes in Edinburgh. You can't go over your time because they've got like 9 shows in your spot.
Yeah.
So you finish. There's 3 minutes, basically 5 minutes for you to clear out. You got 5 minutes on either side. Load in, 5 minutes load out. And that's it. So my slot was an hour. My show could only be 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And I ran it the first time, and it was 63.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. That's what I expected. There's going to be some fat on this. There's going to be some stories that I can't tell, some jokes I'll throw out. I edited, spent some time, edited, did the next one, 6150. What? I spent easily 3 hours editing. How did I just get rid of 1 minute and 10 seconds? God damn it. How did that happen? And then from there, it just was a process of iteration. I was like, all right, this doesn't work. I like this. I try it. Then I got the show all together. And I did it at QED, and the people from Keith and the Girl were there, and they were very complimentary, and that was nice, to get some industry like, hey, that was good.
Yeah.
And some other people were there, and I was appreciative of all that, and I finally felt like, all right, the show's dialed in.
Yeah.
I've got the stories in the order that I want to have them in. I was going to put the really sad dad stuff at the end, but that was bumming people out at the end of the show. Why not bum them out earlier and then lift them out of the being bummed out? So I got it all together, and you do all these. I had to meet marketing deadlines and get posters printed up and flyers and all this stuff, and you pay all this money for these things. And then I get over, and I go in for my tech rehearsal. That was okay. There was a little choppy at first, and had my flyers, which are people who basically barkers in the city. They pass out flyers to get people to come to your show. And I was paying 2 people £10 for an hour right ahead of the show, because all the people that I talked to said, yeah, it's the hour before your show is when you're going to get your audience, get flyers, have them do it. And I was doing it during the day a little bit, and then I was trying to my plan was to let them do it at night. And then the first night, there were 2 people in the audience. 3 people, 2 of which I booked in myself. And the other one was a performer who was coming in to check out another comedian. And he turned out, I got to be friends with the guy. He was nice. And that was the real struggle of the whole thing. Is getting audience in. And if I had it to do over again, I would get those barkers on the streets earlier to start building momentum.
Yeah.
Because everybody that I saw in the show, I had barked myself because I was going out pitching my show. It's a really cool environment because you can walk up to a table full of people and go, hey, I'm Troy. I'm here. I'm doing my one-man show over the Space UK. Let me tell you a little bit about it. And they'll listen because that's what they're there for.
Right.
For the most part. Occasionally a table's like, no, we're not interested. Fine, walk away. But it in contrast to New York, where every 90% of the responses are "fuck you,
go fuck yourself,"
and in Edinburgh it was like, "Yeah, let's hear your pitch," and I could make tables laugh. I could say, "Hey, look, I'm to tell stories about the worst things that have ever happened in my life," and I'd list it. I'd be like, I broke my ankle, my dad's Parkinson's, a suicide attempt. And if you're not laughing now, you're not going to like the show. And they would go, that's funny, yeah, this is gonna. And those people came to the show. But the flyers, as far as I could tell, didn't produce any results. And I don't know if that's a function of what they were saying, because one of them I know a friend of mine used, and he sold out his shows. It was maybe his 5th year. I don't know how long it took him to build that momentum, but he sold out. And I was like, okay, I've got this covered. That was the real struggle, is getting crowd in. Because I didn't do the free fringe, it might have been a little harder as a result of that. It built, the last show was maybe 21, 22 people. And that was the biggest crowd I had. And I was counting on that to be my low-end average.
Right.
So I could make some of that money back.
Sure.
I did not make the money back that I was hoping to make back. That said, it was still a good experience. It focused me in ways that I've never been focused before. I had to work on this material in ways I've never had to work on stuff.
Yeah.
Because now I'm under the gun. It's my thing. It's my 50 minutes, and I got to get it done. So it was very good that way. And, it'll teach you some things about what you want to write about. And now that I'm done with that, I have some bits in my stand-up, and I'm like, I don't care about that joke at all.
Yeah.
I don't care about that bit at all. It works 90% of the time, as well as any other joke in my, in a set that you take out on the road works.
Yep.
And now I look at it, I'm like,
Yeah.
Not all of them, but I'm saying, what do I connect to in this? What stream from my consciousness and to this joke is important to me? What line? And some of them they just don't, because now the stuff I did 50 minutes of, my adopted daughter and my dad being a pedophile, having Parkinson's, and now I'm coming back to like, so I saw a YouTube video about Sphinx cats and so bald pussy.
Yeah.
What?
It's like the difference between hearing a catchy pop song and going, oh, that's a catchy song, and you bob your head to it, and then you hear a song, you're like, that song speaks to my heart. I'm going to love that song forever.
Yeah.
It's kind of the difference between...
what just popped in my head is for a song? It's 3 Days Grace, Never Too Late.
Oh, I don't know that one. I know 3 Days Grace, but I don't think I know that particular song.
It's somebody who's going to kill themselves, and he's trying to talk them out of it, basically, and trying to give them a pep talk. But it's one of their songs that I like the most. I just was listening to it before I came over, just because it was on.
Oh.
I was like, I haven't heard that song in a while. Let's play it. And then I'm looking up the bass tab because I've got my bass out. I'm like, let me see if I can get this.
Yeah.
If I can get 3 measures of the bass line down, that's a good day of work right there.
Yeah.
That's a good quality output for the day. I can sign off. I can go out and drink.
Absolutely. Do you think you'll do Fringe again next year?
Yeah.
Same show or a different show?
I'm going to do the same show, but I want to expand it because I've got some stories in there that I didn't get to tell. one of which is a New York story about a woman who was run over by a truck at 58th and 2nd. That's not my pain, which is how I got rid of that story out of the original show to begin with.
Yeah.
Because it's not my pain.
Right.
It's hers, and I thought, let's just keep this to specifically me and what I'm feeling. And then next year I can do funny stories about pain and have that story in there. And also I do a bit on anger, and I tell a story about basically getting into a physical altercation with a van at 63rd Street because I'm rational. And I've got another one that I want to tell, and it happened in March of this year. And it's I got interrogated by 2 federal agents in Washington Square Park for some comments I made to the IRS over the phone the day before.
You're the second person I've had in here that's had something like this happen.
Oh, really?
Jake Flores had Homeland Security show up at his apartment.
I saw that. I saw Jake Flores' post, and I was thinking about him because I had this IRS. Do we have time? I can.
Oh yeah, we got time.
Yeah, I was on the phone with the IRS because I had a tax bill that I was been paying off. I set up a monthly arrangement because it was kind of I got nailed.
Yeah.
I didn't think this club was reporting income.
Sure.
And I get this tax form from them, and after I'd already sent my taxes in, I was like, oh no.
Right.
And the IRS was like, we saw this, and you did not report it. You owe this. It's like, okay, I'll just make payments on this. And I called in, and it was I'd been making these payments religiously.
Yeah.
And I call in to find out that they had canceled my payment agreement 2 years ago. I never heard anything about it. I was still making the payments, so it was still being applied, but because of the penalties and stuff they'd assessed, my bill was the same amount as it was when I started.
Oh, no.
I thought it was almost paid off.
Uh-huh.
And I lost my shit. I just started screaming. I didn't consider for a fact, not a single moment, that there was a human being on the other end of that phone, and I just started screaming. I screamed through 2 transfers and then finally stopped screaming when I heard, "Be-doo-doot, please hang up and try your call again." That's when
So
I
you
stopped screaming.
kept
They had
going.
just been like, nope, we got to get rid of this guy. And I remember thinking when I hung up, I was like, you know what? The line of what was okay is roughly 50 yards behind me. It's back here. I can't see it anymore. That was too much, Troy. Even for your Irish German can't control your temper self, that was excessive. And then I just brushed it off. I was like, whatever. I don't give a fuck. I was still pissed. This isn't going to be anything. And I got to work the next day, and I was pretty much done with my work day, and I had a phone message. And it was, hello, Mr. Clovis. This is Agent Bailey from the Department of Treasury Investigation Services. We would like you to call us back. We would like to talk to you about some things you said in a phone call with the IRS yesterday. And I was like, oh, no. God. And I got to be honest when I say that almost all of this story was amusing to me as it was unfolding. Almost all of it. And that's not good, but it's just how I felt. I was like, all right, I'll call you back. And I was belligerent from the get-go. I was like, I'm not afraid of you, fucking federale. I'm sure that was rattling around in my head somewhere from a movie I've seen. I'm not afraid of you. And I call him back, and we have this back and forth about, trying to verify my name. You called me. You got to verify you called me. Being just a belligerent dick. And finally, he's like, all right, look, we just want to talk to you about this. Will you meet with us in person? And I just, without thinking, I said, fuck you. I'll meet you in person so you can arrest me? What do you think, I'm stupid? Born yesterday? And he went, sir, if we wanted to arrest you, we would have come to your house or your job and we would have arrested you. I was like, fuck. Both of those pieces of information were spot on correct. All right, I get it. I'm at an incredible disadvantage here from every aspect. And I was like, okay, well, I'll meet you. I'll meet you. So we agreed to meet in Washington Square Park. And I have a friend of mine, Mary, and I called her to let her know what was going on. because there was a not a distinct possibility, the faint possibility that I could be going to a federal dungeon right now.
Right.
I'm on my way. I'm turning myself into federal agents. This isn't the way it should go down. And I let her know what was going on. She's like, oh, God, okay, call me when it's over, okay? I was like, all right, I'm sorry. She was more annoyed. Right. But I needed someone to know that I was about to head into the dungeon.
Sure.
And on my way, I wanted these guys to know that I was not intimidated by them. I wanted them to know that I didn't care what was happening. So I made the conscious decision to stop at a Starbucks and pick up a triple berry parfait with granola in the top of it and eat it when I was approaching them. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. My first thought was an ice cream cone. But that wasn't a real possibility because I teach spin that night at 6:30 and I didn't want the empty calories. This is what's going on in my head. That's legitimately what's happening in my brain is that I'm trying to differentiate between yogurt and ice cream.
I love how rational a thought that is in the midst of pure insanity.
Well, it's pure childish belligerence, I'm like, well, I got to have healthy food if I'm to survive or protect myself against prison rape. I don't know what's going to happen. And I spot the agents. They were so easy to find because they were the same height, same build. One was bald, but they were the same height. One was, I think, one was Latin American, I don't know, and that was just a white guy, bald guy.
Sure.
But they're the same height, had the vests on, and they were so easy to spot. I spotted them, and I poured the granola in the top, and I'm pushing the spoon in and taking bites in my triple berry parfait like I'm loading a shotgun and walking toward these guys for confrontation. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm a badass. I'm not afraid. I'm Kaiser Sose right now. Kaiser Parfait, fucking idiot. And I walk up, and they looked at me, and they look at the parfait, and they look back at me, and they're like, okay, I don't think we have to take this dude very seriously.
Right.
Because immediately I started making jokes. The nerves kicked in a little bit in that moment. I was like, all right, I better kind of schmooze this because I said some shit.
Yeah.
And we strike up a conversation. They were nice enough guys just doing their damn job, and you could tell they were like, we hate this. But we go find kind of a secluded area where there wasn't anybody around, and this guy pulls out the yellow legal pad. I think it was Agent Bailey was his name. He pulls out this yellow legal pad, and he's like, all right, let's talk about the phone call yesterday. And he starts flipping through like pages of notes. And he's like, what did you mean when you said you're surprised there hasn't been a mass shooting at the IRS offices? And I was like, well, that's not a figurative statement. I'm just saying I'm surprised with the way they screw people that there hasn't been a mass shooting. I'm just surprised. And he's like, okay. And like I said, I didn't say I was going to do it. I just said I'm surprised it hasn't happened. He's like, okay, let's move on. Flips through again. He's like, so what did you mean when you said if they show up at your job, they're going to have to get through you first, and that's not going to happen? Because I think at some point they're going to say, we will come to your job and garnish your wages. Like, you come to my job, that's going to be a bad day for whoever comes to my job.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't know how to get out of this one. I can't wiggle out of this one right yet. I said, look, I was just angry, and I was just there, threatening my employment or something that I could threaten my employment, so I'm lashing out. And he went, yeah, we see that a lot. And he keeps flipping through. And finally they figure out, look, this dude just lost his temper. He's not a real threat to anybody.
Sure.
And we wrap up the whole conversation. And at one point, I said something. We're on this topic about, if they came to my job. And I said, but if they do come to my job, expect to have a confrontation with me. I'm not going to let this go down. And the one guy goes, the white guy holds up his hands. He's like, all right, stop. Let me stop you before I have to put handcuffs on you. What you've just said constitutes a violation of U.S. code, blah, 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 interfering with a government investigation. And I said, well, if that's all it is, then I'll get Mueller to investigate me, and it won't matter. as cheap joke as a cheap joke gets. And he just went, all right. Yeah. That was the point at which I think they realized, they're like, all right, fuck this guy. This is, for sure. We're wasting our time. This dude's not going to do anything. And they said, look, don't do this again or we're going to take you to jail. And I said, guaranteed. And they said, why don't you just call the taxpayer advocate's office and have them help you resolve it? And I said, well, why didn't they just say that to me yesterday? And he said, sir, they tried. And
They tried.
You didn't stop yelling. You did not take a breath for a solid 8 minutes. And I was like, okay, well, that's what that was.
Oh, that's amazing. And this is going to be in the show?
That'll be in the next one,
Excellent.
in the anger section of the show.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, that sounds great. And if if you need to do some workshop shows, let me know. We could set something up because I'm always trying to get chunks that I can work my show in bits and pieces too. So if you ever need to do something, let's
absolutely
set something up.
The way I'm, if you're going to do it, get started early, get started now, start putting the show together. And I would say don't wait until you think you're ready. If you're thinking about doing it, just set the date and let that dictate the stress. Because it will force you to do things, and that's why I did it. I was like, I need something to focus my energies because I'm scattered. I've had a rough couple of years, and I need something to focus me. Mm-hmm. And it did it. But get started now, start workshopping it now, get it refined, and take your own tech person because I had a different tech person a couple times, and it affected one show.
Gotcha.
You don't want that.
Okay, sounds good. I'll make sure I do that. Is there anything we can plug before we get out of here?
I'm going to be at the Bomb Shelter comedy show tomorrow night. Also, comedy school dropout at Beauty Bar. And the Bomb Shelter is at Gaff West on the west side, and then Gotham Saturday or Friday at 7.
Cool. Sounds good, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it, Troy.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Troy's led a really interesting life. I'm glad he's still out there in his adventures in the world of comedy. And man, he has had just some crazy stories. That's the kind of story. There's a lot of stuff that he's dealt with that I don't know. It is definitely those kind of thing that you can't think how you would react until you're put in that situation. And I think there's a lot that can be gleaned from hearing Troy talk about his life. So I want to thank Troy for his honesty and his candor, and for a hilarious story at the end there. I had no idea that was going to happen, but I was really laughing a lot listening to that. So thank you, Troy. And I'll have links for Troy's stuff if you want to check out his shows in the description. I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level. Thank you so much, Mary Beth Mooney, for your continued support of the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you guys want to hear your name shouted out on the podcast at the end credits as well, and if you would also like to have a custom playlist made for you, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster. Check out some of the reward tiers that are available. Even if you can't contribute, I just appreciate that you would even think to do that. If you want to give that a share to some folks, that would be tremendously helpful as well. I gotta think of some other ways. Maybe I'll start advertising like on a monthly basis for the show. We'll see. I don't know if anyone's interested in that, but if you are, you can find me on Twitter at @ComicWillCarey. I can also be found on Instagram, WillCarey23. And if you guys are tired of hearing me host my own podcast, you can listen to me on a new podcast called On the Impossible Pod, where I talk about the song Burn After Writing by the Menzingers, which are a great punk rock band from Philadelphia. And lots of fans of that band are listening to this podcast and are really enjoying it. And I had a great time talking to the host, Cheska. So, Cheska, if you're listening to this, thank you for having me on. And you can check out On the Impossible Pod everywhere you get your podcasts, as well as Between Awesome and Disaster everywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you guys so much for listening and for the support. It really means a lot. And feel free to give a rating or review on Stitcher or iTunes, your preferred podcast listening platform. And thank you guys again so much for being here every week. I'll see you next week Between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.